Well, this morning we have Mr. Kabiru Adamu, who is a security expert, joining us on the conversation. It's good to see you again.
It is good. Unfortunately, the topic is not so good.
Sadly. But this is where we are, and it would seem that over and over again, we have to bring this matter to the fore. We'll experience, will I say, a quieting down, and then all of a sudden, a resurgence. And the resurgence oftentimes takes us by surprise. We lose people in their numbers. As a matter of fact, we understand that in Benue State now, about 85 people have lost their lives in the last 5 days. And so it really have a lot of people wondering what precisely is going on. From what you know, what would you say is happening around the Plateau to Benue to Kwara belt? What exactly is going on?
With all sense of responsibility, Mokwe, as you know, I head an organization, Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, and part of what we do is we have a database of security occurrences, and we produce products from that database. Now, at the end of the March, we produced our first quarter report, and interestingly, Benue did not feature as part of the top 5 states that are most affected. Neither did Plateau State feature. It was more Borno, Niger, and Katsina State, as well as Zamfara. Point I'm trying to make is this problem is multifaceted. It has spread across several states in Nigeria, and because we've not addressed the drivers and the triggers of insecurity, as it were, sadly, they have become institutionalized, and in certain instances are actually expanding. In that period, we recorded almost about 3,800 deaths from January to March, end of March 2025, and then over 2,000 kidnapped for ransom incidents.
Did you say 3,000 deaths?
Yes, in just 3 months. Okay, so it is worrisome, and I'm hoping that the Thursday meeting that the president is going to have is going to be a full-fledged National Security Council meeting. No country can lose up to 3,000 of its citizens within 3 months and not convene some form of high level. The National Security Council is the highest organ that we have for managing public security. That meeting, I'm hoping the Thursday meeting that I'm here, it's going to be held, should not be an ad hoc meeting. It should be a full-fledged National Security Council meeting where we discuss these drivers and triggers of insecurity. Otherwise, we have a monster that is beginning to eat up our national polity. The kind of conversations I'm hearing from different players is a conversation that is extremely worrisome, and I don't blame them. A lot of them are worried, they are confused. So the narratives they are giving is an understanding of what they feel is the problem. But in my honest opinion, and as a professional, each of those problems may be right in itself. But what is best for us in such a circumstance is to come together as a people. All of those problems, put it in a basket, and then start to address the major cause. And what is the major cause? A failure of public security. As a Nigerian, okay, you should be able to start your car, drive back to your home, drive from here to, maybe Lagos or wherever, and you shouldn't be bothered, irrespective of your religion, your tribe, your gender. That it's a very simple ask from the government, and it's doable. The solutions have been proffered. We just need to put them in a basket, and then we hold those that are responsible accountable for implementing those solutions.
I watched yesterday the news at 10, and I was listening to the fact that the first 15 minutes of our news was talking about insecurity in almost every part of the country. There's no part that hasn't been affected in one way or the other. No part has been spared. And as I kicked my car this morning, coming to work, I said, this is now a luxury. Some people cannot afford to do this where they live. Just start your car and say, I'm going to work, and know that, okay, all things being equal, God willing, I will come back home safely. Even if anything will happen, it will not be because somebody just decided to, shoot a gun.
Yeah.
It is very worrisome that this is what our citizens now have to go through.
And I feel the pulse of the people Like you said, 15 minutes, and it cuts across all the platforms. Your platform, other platforms, almost entirely that first 15 minutes is dedicated to discussing security. But we need to move from there, Mokwe.
Yeah, but you've just spoken about drivers. Some people say maybe this is more than drivers. Right now...
Drivers and triggers.
So you now have the governor of Plateau State speaking to an agenda. He says this is a genocide. You hear the leaders, the political leaders or traditional leaders in Benue State saying there is an agenda to wipe us out. You know, so you now begin to ask, is this about just, you know, is this about poverty or inequality? Is there an attempt somewhere for some people to get rid of some people and occupy their territory? Is this what is going on?
They may be right in their perception of the challenges, but when a governor speaks in that manner, the first thing that comes to my mind is he has the responsibility to protect his people as the executive governor of the state. And then I ask myself, has he done enough in terms of, you know, putting in place the necessary infrastructure to protect his people? And in most instances, Mokwe, with all sense of responsibility, they haven't done enough. I always like to give the example of Lagos State. Lagos has a near excellent public security system that has layers. There is no other state in Nigeria that has that. So when a governor sits back and kind of, you know, passes the bulk to another party, I am not very comfortable about that. Let him do what he's supposed to do first. Even if, for instance, it's about land grabbing, the question I ask is, what has stopped you from titling the land? As in first step, title the land, and then even if somebody grabs it, tomorrow the owner of that land has a document to show it's my land. So first, it's a deterrence. And then secondly, it allows you to know who owns what within your state. Now, they haven't done that. The second thing is the infrastructure, the platform for public security. We should, in Lagos State, and it's experimented, nobody told me this, I saw it. If an incident happens in Lagos, the security structures in Lagos can deploy within 7 minutes. Now, it just didn't happen out of the blues. It's because they put certain things in place. Now, in Plateau State, the complaint I hear repeatedly is that the topography is bad. Some of these locations are difficult to access. But for God's sake, that's a failure of governance. If you know you have a local government that does not have infrastructure, that you cannot access, it needs to like 20 minutes or 30 minutes to the nearest police formation. What have you done? What kind of structure have you put in place to support public security in that location? Or who are you waiting for to do that? So this is my point. They need to take responsibility for the offices that they are holding and protect the people in a manner that allows us to now go after the enemy. And it may be true that the enemy is an outsider. It may be true that the enemy is inside, but the responsibility for identifying and arresting that enemy is on the government. And the moment we turn the public pulse that I'm hearing now to that area of conversation, I think the happier it will be for all of us. Because it's not you and I that will go and arrest that person. Mm-hmm. It's the responsibility is on government, whether at the federal level or at the state level. And I think the earlier they start doing that, the better for all of us. The narrative that I'm hearing right now, honestly, the only thing it would lead to is more disunity. And we don't want that. I keep on saying, and people don't want to hear this, most of the conflicts we have in the northern part of the country are identity-based conflict. There are two or several groups of people who are trying to pursue disparate interests. And where those interests clash, you see the kind of conflicts that we're having. And
then you now have suspicion and distrust. So when you say everyone come together, it's a very, I don't know how to put it now, it's a delicate thing, because for you to come together, you must trust that all of you have the same interest at heart. Here we were a few years ago when we heard a former chief of army staff, very well respected in the country, still very, very influential today, Lieutenant General T.Y. Danjuma, asking his people to arm themselves, defend yourselves, and saying that the security was compromised at the time. Today, he's restated that call, a little more toned down this time around, but nonetheless still asking that citizens be allowed to defend themselves. If this is not included in the conversations that are being held, do you think that we're really going to make progress?
I'm not supportive of the call for communities to defend themselves for the simple reason that those who are making the call have not done, I mean, there are layers. Why don't you start with reminding government of its responsibility? And this is the point I'm trying to make. The first layer of responsibility is with government. If we come to a state where some people are, like the respected retired General T.Y. Danjuma, to say that government, quote and unquote, quoting him, government has failed. Because by him saying people should defend themselves is an admittance that government has failed. And I don't want to reach that stage, Mokwe. We are in a democratic system. If we come to the acceptance that government has failed, then perhaps maybe during elections we should reflect that we are not happy with that. But never, and I would never support that we should push the responsibility to communities. Let's do the right thing, which is to demand for accountability from those that govern us. It is their responsibility to protect us. Mokwe, let me remind us that in the 2025 budget, the provision for security is higher than any other sector, higher than health, higher than education. It's about 3 point, if I remember well, about 3.7, because the budget was thinking trillion. The next one you hear is about 1.7 trillion. And Mokwe, that's not all. When we deconstructed the budget and looked at the provision in MDAs, the provision for security votes to state, we're talking of 6 trillion naira to security. So how can I sit here and say I would not want to hold those that have the responsibility for security accountable? I think that's the message.
But do they have to be mutually exclusive? Can they go hand in hand? Because on the one hand, yes, we will hold government accountable, and we ought to hold government accountable, but clearly I don't want to say it has failed, but it is failing citizens where it cannot protect them. I mean, 80-something people dead in Benue alone. In Plateau, we're looking at over 100 people dead. You just spoke to 3,000 people having died in the first quarter of this year alone. These are human beings, lives, what we're talking about here. Shouldn't we get to the point where we say, look, while we're putting infrastructure in place, citizens must be allowed to, communities must be allowed to protect themselves.
Mokwe, we're not even putting the infrastructure in place. All I hear is discussions and conversations. We need to turn the narrative to one of accountability, so that the necessary, this can be done. We're not asking for, a rocket science, a new development. The assets that are required to protect the public are already there. We just need to deploy those assets. Let me give you an example. If we go to community policing, we've had a community policing policy in place for how many years now? What is stopping us from implementing that? There are two components to that. The community policing committees, which have already been almost inaugurated across the country. Then the constabularies that have almost been recruited. But for some odd reasons, our political class is preventing that from being implemented. And so my point is, let's hold those that are responsible accountable. I agree that as a secondary measure, communities can defend themselves. But the danger with that is, like I said at the beginning, this is an identity-based conflict. So imagine a situation where the perceived enemy is the other group, the we and them situation. So the we now gets weapons. Let's say they get AK-47s to protect themselves. Is the them now also going to sit back? They're also going to get AK-47. So honestly, it's going to be a situation of chaos. And my worry with that situation is the perceived enemy, the real enemy rather, not the perceived enemy, the real enemy is now somewhere in the middle, laughing. So why don't the two come together and then address that common enemy? We're not having that conversation yet.
Well, I think Ayo has questions for you.
Well, thank you, Mokwe. One of the first questions that comes to my mind is many times it would seem, Mr. Kabira, that when we talk about insecurity in Nigeria and when we're talking about government and who is supposed to do anything about it, we're always looking only at the federal government. And most of the time we tend surreptitiously, maybe inadvertently, or maybe negligently, to ignore the responsibility of the state governments in this. Even the state governments themselves are calling on the federal government. You just cited Lagos now, and that Lagos has a system in place where, I mean, within 7 minutes, you said, there's a response, irrespective of its humongous population and its own logistical challenges as well. Does it seem to you like we do that, like we excuse the governors and heap all of the responsibility of securing the citizens of Nigeria on the federal government alone?
And rightly so, Ayo, sadly, because at the moment, the Constitution places security within the exclusive list. And so the average Nigerian kind of thinks about that when he's, discussing security. And most of the armed security departments, ministries, departments, and agencies are within the federal purview. Yes, states have created structures, and in some instances, they've backed those creations with legislation. But the reality, as it were, is that as at today, our Constitution places security in the exclusive list. In real terms, however, we've woken up to a reality where there is no state in the country that does not have some form of security structure. The only challenge is that while in some states, like the example I gave of Lagos, those structures are effective and to an extent efficient. Outside of Lagos, I doubt if there's any other state that has what we would describe as an effective or efficient systems. They've created structures, sadly, that are not effective. Some are doing much better than others. An example is the Amotekun, structure that was created. In terms of intelligence gathering, I think they're doing quite well in that regard, but that's just one component of a good public security system. The response capability is also absolutely important. No matter how good your intelligence is, if you do not have response capabilities, then that's a huge challenge. So for a state that has difficult topography, it has to have a system that allows for response in a speedy manner. And then in complex environments like what we have in the north, let me use Plateau State as an example. Plateau State has common borders with Bauchi State, with Taraba State, with Kaduna State. And sadly, most of these border areas are forested and in some instances mountainous. So whatever Plateau State does, if it does not extend a handshake to these other states where they're able to share intelligence, where they're able to, in some instances, carry out joint operations, then it would not be successful. And I think this is where we are at the moment. So in simple terms, people may not be wrong when they perceive security as a federal institution, but we need to move from there to now have a decentralized security system that recognizes the role of the state and, more importantly, that recognizes the role of the local governments. And this is why I must commend the Bola Tinubu administration for attempting to have an autonomous and functional local government system. And I think the state governors need to accept this, embrace it, and give some level of security responsibility to this local government chairman once that structure is also functional, because most of the drivers and triggers of insecurity are actually at that level of governance. They're not even at the state level, they're at that local government level.
What's also interesting,
able to address it. And there are case studies, Ayo.
My apologies. What's also interesting is the local government administration that I just spoke to now is the opinion and perhaps even the strategy of the governor of Jigawa State, whom when we spoke with him, he said the way he addressed it, and he would advise anyone to do it, was to engage the locals. I mean, you tell us all the time, security consultants, that all insecurity is local. Why call the federal government on? Why wait for the federal government? You said it just now, and you've repeated it time and time again, that Lagos State government decided to do something, even though they didn't have all of the apparatus of security. There is some form of collaboration, there is some form of system put in place. And this didn't just happen, just as you said. It's taking administration after administration in one state to get that done. Now, the governor of Jigawa State also says that the way he dealt with it was to consult. And we have heard from previous governors of the various northern states that they needed to collaborate. And you just spoke to it as well. Why hasn't that been happening? Because unless that happens, unless there's that sit down with the governors, among the governors by themselves, I wonder when we're going to put an end to this.
Exactly, and I think this is where the public discourse at the moment needs to shift to. We need to shift from, the constant complain about insecurity to now demanding for action from the necessary places. State governors would need to be more intentional. I would urge perhaps that they, maybe at their next governors forum, ask the Lagos state government to do a presentation to them, or ask expertise from private players. I'll be happy to support that, where they do some form of peer-to-peer learning. What is it that Lagos is doing right that has created the right environment, as it were, in Lagos? What is it that Jigawa is doing that, in spite of the fact that almost all the other northwest states are being affected by insecurity, Jigawa has remained relatively, secure, and Kano as well. So some form of peer-to-peer learning. But point I'm making is we need to also put pressure on the governors to start a functional and intentional system of public security. It's not about buying vehicles, because that's really the go-to for governors. They buy vehicles and donate those vehicles to the police. That can be good, but it must be put in context. Security has about 6 layers. The vehicles are only supporting 1 layer. There are several other layers that the governors can do. Of course, our role too as citizens, we must buttress that. We can't support good public security. Those triggers and drivers that I've spoken about, it includes the value system that has almost collapsed. Families who no longer guide their children, as it were, to understand good and bad, and children kind of grow up with embracing criminality. And all of that, schools that encourage criminality, as it were, religious places of worship that encourage criminality. And somebody may be wondering why I'm saying that. If somebody steals money and comes to donate to you and you don't question that, you are more or less encouraging criminality, or even honor him by giving him the front pew or the front row to sit. All those are ways of encouraging criminality. So we must, as a people, also support all of this, in spite of the fact that the responsibility at the moment is placed on the government.
All right, Mr. Adamu, how much of it
forward to that meeting that will hold tomorrow, from what we understand? Today is Wednesday, tomorrow is Thursday. The NSA has already paid a visit to Benue State. Is unclear where if he'll be visiting anywhere else today.
I hope he goes to Zamfara. I hope he goes to Katsina. I hope he goes to Niger. I hope he goes to Kaduna, because these are also conflict hotspots in the country. Visits may be important to condole and show sympathy, but what is more important is to stop the killing. Okay. I've listed about 4 things. I don't know if we have time for me to quickly just mention them. So I've listed 4 things that I think we can do to improve public security. Number 1 is to have a professional, well-resourced police and security architecture that is locally rooted but nationally accountable. Number 2 is a conflict-sensitive governance that addresses land dispute, political marginalization, and resource competition, which is happening especially in the north central and northwestern part of the country. Number 3 is a justice system that is fair, fast, and credible, so that people don't feel the need to take the laws into their own hands. And then number 4, civic education and dialogue platforms that help bridge divides, not widen them. If we can do these 4 things, I'm hoping that the meeting tomorrow is not an ad hoc security meeting. I hope it's a National Security Council meeting, a proper one, so that the administrative tools can hold the outcome of that meeting and develop tools that they can now use for accountability purposes.
Mr. Kabiru Adamu, thank you so much for coming on the program.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.